And we are set to go. So once again, welcome everyone. My name is Evan Lofton. I am the presenter for this evening. I am the Chief Academic and Accountability Officer for District 97. And if you're in the right place, we're here to talk about single subject and whole grade acceleration, hopefully answer some questions you have, share some information in advance of the window opening on March 1st. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We have a pretty robust agenda, but I hope to spend the majority of that agenda answering questions. So we'll talk about the purpose of acceleration, also a quick definition of single subject and whole grade acceleration. We'll talk a bit about the benefits and implications of acceleration. I'll go over the process a bit. We've also received some questions from all of you via the Google form. So we've compiled the ones that most frequently were asked, and we'll go over a couple slides of FAQs. And then there will be a chance for you to ask some questions that are about the process in general. I won't be able to answer questions that are specific to your student, but there'll be a chance for you to ask some questions in the chat. So during that time, I would just ask that you please type those questions in, and I will read them, the question and then the answer following that. And that is our agenda for today. So I just wanted to make sure that it was understood that this work is really rooted in our entire system of supports for students. So when we're thinking about making sure that all students are successful, we know that there are some students who may need intervention supports. And so they may fall within our tier 3 and perhaps our tier 2 models in terms of needing just a little bit more support to become successful in either reading ELA or English language arts. Most of our students fall within that tier 1, where they are right on grade level. They're doing exactly what we would expect them to do, and really happy with their progress. For some students, and this is where we get into kind of the tier 1+ and the tier 1++, they need some advanced learning. So in order for them to really make sure that we're maximizing their experience, they may need a little bit more support in terms of enrichment. So they may receive support from our enrichment specialists that push into classrooms, or in this case, they may qualify for acceleration. So if you're looking at the tier 1++ and the tier 1+, these are students, again, who require some additional enrichment to maximize their educational experience. And that's kind of where we're talking today, but wanted to make sure that we rooted everyone in the entire framework, and that we really want to make sure that we are supporting students wherever they are, and making sure that they're successful to the extent that we absolutely can. So in terms of acceleration, so what does it mean to be gifted? For us, children are gifted when their ability is significantly above what you would consider normal for their age. And there are a number of ways to be gifted. So it could be intellectual, creative, artistic. Students could have amazing leadership skills, or in a specific academic field. So it could be language arts, mathematics, or science. But really we're talking about and their ability is significantly above what we would consider average or normal for their age range. To make sure that we're thinking about those needs, Illinois has adopted or has moved forward with the Accelerated Placement Act. So what is that? That expands services to all students, and not those that have historically been identified as gifted and talented, but really any student who has demonstrated high ability and could benefit from acceleration. So it requires us to think about our policies and determine what's the best way to provide that access. So we need to actually have a process, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that really kind of brings in our equity policy, brings in multiple measures of growth, academic growth and achievement, and is really kind of fair in terms of schools making those decisions for students in concert with you. So for us, accelerated placement really refers to 3 different avenues. So we're not talking about this today, but a child could enter kindergarten or 1st grade early. So that's our early entrance program. A child could also accelerate in a single subject. It could be math, English language arts, could be Spanish, but that is a single subject, just one subject that students are moving forward in. So it could be a 5th grader taking 6th grade math, a 3rd grader taking 4th grade English language arts. That would be single subject. The last category would be a child accelerating through a whole grade. So that could be age appropriate 1st grader accelerating into 2nd grade for all of those subjects. So math, English language arts, and all of the specials, science and social studies. So for us, in terms of the purpose, and when we think about acceleration, what we want to do is to identify and make sure that we're adequately serving the highly advanced students who require that comprehensive academic acceleration, either single subject or a whole grade. And it is intended to support students who are evaluated to be exceptional in aptitude, cognitive reasoning, academics, and also motivation. So we'll start with single subject acceleration first. So again, as I mentioned, it's the practice of assigning a student to a higher grade level or subject level than is typical. So again, a second grader accessing third grade content in a single subject, math or language arts or Spanish or whatever that might be, for the purpose of really making sure that we're providing appropriate challenge for them in those subject areas. So what would happen is that student would actually be in a second grade classroom and move up and move to a third grade math course or go to a third grade English language arts course, or it could be a fifth grader who's again in a fifth grade, assigned to a fifth grade homeroom, who goes to middle school for perhaps sixth grade math or sixth grade English language arts. Whole grade acceleration is when we actually assign the student to a higher grade level in its entirety. That's different in terms of their age. So you could have an age appropriate second grader who now takes all their content in a third grade classroom, or age appropriate seventh grader who now takes all of their content in an eighth grade classroom. And so we're hoping obviously that grade acceleration, because of our timelines, that happens at the beginning of each year. And we'll talk about that also for single subject. Our goal is to make sure that all of these transitions happen at the beginning of a school year. So when we think about what teams should consider, and so these are local team decisions, so your school teams will really make these decisions. In terms of what they take into account, there are a number of different factors. So again, going back to that Accelerated Placement Act, we want to make sure that we're considering multiple categories of data. So we definitely want to look at school history, so how their career and journey has been with us or in another school thus far. We want to look at their ability. And that's typically done with our school psychologists with an IQ assessment. We also want to look at aptitude. So that means how are students approaching novel material? So we typically look at that with an above level achievement assessment. So it could be that a student is taking an end of year test and is exposed to content that they may not have been that they may not have seen yet because it's not grade appropriate, but how do they actually approach the math? How do they approach the reading? How do they approach the text? And then assessments of achievement. So this is something that's at their grade level. So and to what degree has the student actually mastered their grade level content? And then finally, we always want to think about the whole child and what are those social emotional skills that they would need, motivation, perseverance, to really make sure that they're successful in the grade of acceleration, should they be successful in that journey. And with that, we want to be completely transparent about the implications for acceleration and what that might mean. So there could be that as a child moves into single subject acceleration, there could be scheduling conflicts at the school. So the master schedule that each school comes up with every year doesn't really change. And it's rooted in a number of different things that are also rooted again in our equity policy. So we need to make sure that we deliver special education services in a way that's equitable. We need to make sure that we provide art, music, Spanish, and that's done sometimes when teachers are traveling. So those schedules are kind of set in advance. We also have different lunch recess schedules, and that's been kind of impacted by the pandemic in terms of us having kind of a longer lunch. So the master schedule does not change. So there could be a chance where the class that you'd like to accelerate into, there is a scheduling conflict. What we won't do is replace core content. So at each school, you'll have a chance to kind of talk about what that might look like in terms of a change in schedule for that single subject acceleration, and have that conversation. So just want to make sure that everyone's aware at the onset that those scheduling conflicts may occur. In terms of the 5th to 6th grade transition and also the 8th to high school in terms of single subject acceleration, this year we were able to work remotely with our 5th to 6th grade students. So they actually took a remote course. Every student who needed access to 6th grade math in the district took a course with a 5th grade teacher because of the pandemic and not wanting to disrupt cohorts. That may change for next year. So typically what happens is that students travel. So we arrange for them to move to the middle school. Typically that happens at the end of a school day, so it's least disruptive. However, and we provide transportation. However, we are still in the midst of making final decisions around the middle school schedule, as well as kind of what our mitigations will look like in the spring. So final decisions about that will be forthcoming. The other implication is that really just acknowledging that students will miss 1 year's worth of content in the grade that is indicated by their age. So there will be a gap potentially there. So just wanted to make sure that we're completely upfront about all of those implications as we consider single subject and whole grade acceleration. The process. So what we've hoped to establish is a really collaborative process for evaluation. So we want to make sure that family members are a part of the team that considers whether or not a student is eligible for single subject or whole grade acceleration. So it starts from the referral. So teachers, families, students themselves, administrators, all of those groups can request that a student either take part in single subject or whole grade level acceleration assessments. So the referral window is wide open. The referrers can be anyone. So our District 97 staff and school administrators are responsible for evaluating those referrals. So we'll take a look at those and that process in just a moment. And then probably most importantly, we need to remember that our referrals are only accepted between March 1st and May 15th, and that is a hard deadline because again, as I mentioned before, we want to make sure that we're not having students matriculate into courses in the middle of a year. And May 15th allows those school teams to make sure that students start their new class or their new grade at the beginning of a school year and not in October, not in November, but at the beginning of that year. So there are a couple of updates to the process. So for this year and beyond, one of the data sources that's key for us to really think about for those who are grade eligible to take IAR is to make sure that students actually take the assessment. So the IAR is important because it really gives us an idea of whether or not students have mastered grade level standards. So before, when I was talking about achievement scores in terms of figuring out whether or not students have mastered those grade level skills, this is a key measure for the MTSS team to review to determine whether or not students are eligible for single subject or whole grade acceleration. Again, IAR is all about the mastery of grade level standards, and it's a critical data piece in terms of us thinking about the whole package and a student's profile. Secondly, for families of students who will be in 5th through 8th grade, next year, we're seeking single subject acceleration in math only. We have a new process. So for our current 5th graders, one of the following pathways, if you're just seeking to get into Math 7 for next year, you can either complete the Math Bridge course, which is still open. Enrollment is open until February 14th. You can get a score of 21 out of 26 on the 6th grade math placement exam that occurs every May to all 5th grade students, or attain a RIT score of 232 on the spring NWEA MAP Plus assessment that will be an optional offering in the spring of this year. For current 6th to 8th graders, you would simply have to successfully complete the Mathematics Bridge course if you're seeking to, again, accelerate one grade level. So this is, again, 5th graders seeking Math 7, not Math 8 or Algebra or Geometry. If you're seeking more than one grade level in a school year, this is the process that you would use. So if you're a 5th grade student who is not seeking Math 7, but instead seeking Math 8, Algebra, or Geometry, this is the process for you. If you're a student who is just seeking a single, or family who's seeking a single acceleration jump, then this would be the process. So again, Registration for the Math Bridge courses close on February 14th. So you still have time to think about that as an option. But this will be the process for single subject acceleration in math for our 5th through 8th grade students seeking a one grade level acceleration. So what does the process look like? Nitty gritty, all of the steps. So first, hopefully you've had a chance to have your conferences and talk with teachers and school staff to really kind of think about the process. If not, just take a moment, send a quick email to your classroom teacher, say that you're considering this, what do you think? Just so you're kind of having that ability to connect with the school team. Step 2, after March 1st. So again, we open on March 1st, 8:30 a.m. each form. You would just submit a referral request via a Google form, and that goes directly to the school team. So I'm going to come out of this presentation just to share the form. So first, in terms of going to our site, you can always, I'm actually in edit mode, so I can't show this to you, but there's a search function at the beginning or at the landing page. You can always just type in acceleration and it'll take you right here. But what you want to do is kind of look at the links. So there's obviously the early entrance link that we're not talking about today, but we'll just take single subject acceleration. It'll take you to a landing page that talks about the referral process. Again, reminding you that it's only accepted, the referrals are only accepted between March 1st and May 15th. But you'll notice that each school has a referral request form. So again, all of them are in alphabetical order. You would go to your home school's referral request form. And I'll show you what it looks like now because they're not open. And then I'll show you what the form actually looks like. So once you click on it, you'll see that it's not quite open yet. It will open on March 1st at 8:30 a.m. But a sample request form, I'm happy to show you that. So essentially what it is that you're providing your information, then just confirming that you're in the right school's form. You'll talk about which type of request you're seeking. So it's either single subject or whole grade. You'll mark the subject area if it's single subject. And then if it's something else, it could be, we've already pre-populated math and English language arts. It could be other, and feel free to kind of put that in there. Then we ask for some student information. So name, birth date, age, grade, race, or ethnicity is just for us. It's not a required question, but we do kind of want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on that. Then you'll see some family information there. Then we do ask about siblings. So if there are siblings that are accelerated, who are they? Just so that we make sure that as we're planning for classes, we're being really thoughtful about that. And then finally, there's a quick section of just kind of some questions that are aligned to our the Iowa acceleration scale. It talks about a student's motor coordination, emotional patterns, any history of discipline, interpersonal skills, to give us an idea if they have any interest in non-school extracurricular activities. Also, your child's attitude toward being accelerated, which is really important for us to understand. And then you'll also get some space to talk to the MTSS team and tell them what else it is that you want to make sure that they know about your child. And then the final step is just a quick acknowledgement that you're submitting a referral request, and the MTSS team will then review and approve your request and provide you with another form. So the official acceleration form, acceleration referral, and we'll actually go back here for just a moment. Step 2, so once the school's MTSS team has actually reviewed and approved your referral request, so that's that form again that you see on the website, you'll be able to go right to your school specific form. Then the principal will provide you with a link to the acceleration referral form. So that form, it simply gives a bit more information. So we're looking at this point, again, you're just kind of repeating the request, making sure that the team has been consulted about acceleration. We're looking for a brief rationale, determining if your student has any special services, and then just some affirmations around giving us the ability to actually screen or give these relevant assessments to your child. And there's a quick acknowledgement of kind of the 5th to 6th grade math framework that we just talked about, and then an IAR acknowledgement. And that is it for Google Forms. So once you receive that referral form and you give the team the permission to move forward with the assessments, what they would do is actually take the 60 school days, because we have to really look at a number of different areas to really build a good profile, so we understand the student's strengths, needs, interests, again, motivation, because we know test scores alone don't tell that story. So we want to make sure that we're really getting a complete picture of your child. And then should your child be eligible for single subject or whole grade acceleration, within meet with the team to complete a transition plan, to think about what it would look like to move into that accelerated grade or that accelerated subject in that next year. So I do want to kind of go through, and that's the process in a nutshell. So I do want to kind of go through some questions before I look in the chat to see what questions you may have, and see if some of these are already answered based on what is most frequently asked. So the first question is, how do I decide if acceleration is right for my student? So this is a deeply personal decision, but if you suspect that your child is really going to be eligible, I would say err on the side of referring. Please, if you think that you're getting even an inkling that a child might be eligible, I would go ahead and submit that referral request. But again, it's a very deeply personal decision that you want to talk to your child about, and also you're the school team to make that final decision. So nothing that I would tell you to do, but just kind of obviously consulting, and really that's a family decision. So we talked a bit about this, but how does scheduling work for single subject acceleration? So again, though the master schedule is static, what typically happens is that a child, so say the 3rd through 5th grade, you have a 3rd grader who's gonna go to 4th grade math class. Typically, there are some bands that have math during this at the same time. So a student would simply just leave during their 3rd grade math course and then join a 4th grade math classroom for single subject acceleration. How does single subject acceleration work for students in 5th grade who require 6th grade content? We also talked a bit about this. We are determining whether or not it will be in person or virtual, but regardless, a student in 5th grade would get that middle school content. So the middle schools for math, for example, are using CMP3, so they would actually be exposed to and work through that 6th grade content. They would take the 6+ NWEA map just as any other 6th grader would, and the same with English language arts. So depending on that single subject or the subject that we're choosing, they would have access to that middle school content. The 4th question, is there anything parents can do to prepare students for the assessments? And I would say no. I mean, you've done all that you need to do at this point. So again, a lot of the assessments, we want to make sure that we're looking at all of the layers of your students. So there's really nothing that can be done in advance to prepare for those assessments. Again, you've already done all of that work. Number 5, why does the assessment process require 60 school days to complete? So again, as we're thinking about all of what the Accelerated Placement Act requires, it is multiple data points. So we need to make sure that we're looking at not just those academic markers or the cognitive markers, but also motivation, having surveys, talking to you to determine exactly what that profile would look like and whether the student is eligible. Because the one thing we want to do is make sure that students are going to be successful. And this is a decision that we don't take lightly. So we want to make sure that we're gathering all of the data necessary to make a good decision. What happens if we decided acceleration is not right for our student? So if it's at the beginning of the process, that's something that we can stop immediately. And students haven't moved forward into classrooms, they haven't become acclimated to a schedule. If it's happening after the student is already in acceleration or in the accelerated grade, then we'd want to make sure that we're talking with the school team to determine the best course, because transition in and out can be difficult for children. So we want to make sure that we're actually providing supports instead of thinking about removing the acceleration. But again, this is your decision. These are your children. So you want to make sure that we support you in that decision, but it would be something that we decide with the team. And that kind of connects to the next question. So what if my student is not flourishing after acceleration? What should our next steps be? So at first, we want to make sure that we're intervening and making sure that we're really providing opportunities for them to be successful. So we'd want to connect with our school teams to determine kind of what we can do to bolster those skills to make sure that acceleration is really a successful endeavor for your child. So we would think about what interventions could be in the grade of acceleration, and then just work again with the team to determine what those next steps beyond that would be. Another question that we got is, what are the single subjects that see the most acceleration in the D97 program? I would say mathematics is definitely the single subject that we see students accelerated the most in as we look at kind of our data across time. But that does not, again, preclude you from English language arts or Spanish or any other course that would be one that you want to move on in. Does the program accommodate students with the 504? Absolutely. So whatever those accommodations are that have been outlined in the 504 and also in IEPs, in that grade, we have to implement by law those accommodations. So that will happen no matter what. And that is definitely something that we take really seriously to make sure that everyone has equitable access to acceleration. The third question, I think this is probably most applicable to elementary school. So is it possible to accelerate in 2 subjects rather than single subject whole grade? So if you're thinking about elementary school, if you're thinking about English language arts and math, that really takes up the bulk of the day. So we're not going to just we're not able to necessarily move students in just those courses. It would have to be whole grade. So that it's no longer a single subject at that point. In middle school, there could be some differences in terms of because we're on a different kind of schedule, that's a different kind of conversation. But again, single subject really does mean single subject. And so we don't want to kind of dilute that process. Number 4, if a student is approved for single subject acceleration, is it assumed in future years they will continue, or do they reapply annually? So once a student is accelerated, we've already decided that that is, again, that's why they spend so much time at the beginning thinking about those 60 days and what that profile is. There's no need to reapply every year. So once a student is eligible for single subject acceleration, they move on. However, if you're interested, for instance, in a 7th grade student who is taking Math 8, but you prefer that they take algebra or geometry, they do have to take those placement exams. So once we've accelerated into 1 grade, if you want to do 2 or more grades, it's not necessarily a reapplication, it's just placement tests into those new courses. The next question, I'd like to understand how math placement in the middle school years impacts math class options at the high school. I'm confused about the trajectories and how it will ultimately impact math classes that a student will be able to take at the time of graduation from high school. And that's a great question. So the high school itself, if you take a look at their website, and go down to, this is just their, as you go to academics and look at mathematics, for example, you'll see that they already have a suggested scope and sequence that tells you the different entry points. But what they've also done is added a quick, and I'm going to make sure I can access it, a quick and easy way for you to kind of look at, as an incoming freshman, what could potentially happen. So if you look at go to their immediate landing page, you'll see incoming freshmen, look here for the math placement presentation on the screen. You can go ahead and look at that placement presentation. And what it tells you is really kind of what math courses they could take in that next year. So for example, if a student has taken Math 8 and they'd like to take algebra, they'll tell you kind of what that course trajectory could look like. And the same with, let's see, I'm sorry, I'm going so fast, but so it'll tell you like kind of where your student is. So if a student is currently taking algebra, or for us, what has historically been Math 8-9, you'll kind of see what those options are and what their prerequisites are in terms of entry. So they have done a great job in really kind of outlining what that could look like. And then the final question was, how many kids usually pass the exam and go on to excel in the program? So what we're looking at in terms of our referral rates are, we're getting really great referrals. So I would say of the students that are referred, probably about 93% actually go on to excel in the program. And it's really rare that we've had, I don't think I recall in the last couple of years, any students who have moved back or changed their placement to reverse the acceleration. So thank you all, because you're making great referrals. And we know that our teachers and students will as well. So that would be it for our frequently asked questions. So I will take a look in the chat. And if you have any student specific questions, I can't answer those, but you can email me. My email is elofton@op97.org. So I'll be looking in the chat for some general questions. I don't want to share student information here publicly, so I won't be taking those or answering those. But I am going to just take a quick look in the chat to see if I can answer any questions. So let's take a look. So in terms of, there's a question here about which subject areas are tested for whole grade acceleration and what they need to score above the 95th percentile in each subject area in order to be considered for whole grade acceleration. So typically, as we're looking at elementary, it would be English, language arts, and math. And we actually kind of look at those base skills across the K-8 continuum. And there isn't a score percentile cutoff that I would share. I think, again, we want to build a profile that tells us that a student will be successful in whole grade. To make that whole grade move, that could also, we have to consider motivation, perseverance, all of those things. So it wouldn't just be the test scores alone. And we wouldn't want to put a number on that, but if you're saying 95th percentile, I think that's a great starting point in terms of being considered. So absolutely, please go through the process and for whole grade if you believe that your student scores that in English, language arts, and mathematics. The next question is, I mentioned the school team will be assessing these skills. Can I just define who the school team is, who's on the team, and who's doing the evaluating? Great question. So we have MTSS, we kind of talk about the MTSS framework, multi-tier system of supports leads at each school that really kind of support this work. And so a school psychologist will probably weigh in on the cognitive testing that will be required. Our MTSS leaders also work on kind of the achievement scores. So they could give an end of year exam. So, and then our teachers always contribute via survey. So different people bring different skills to the team, but the three main people I would say that are really kind of thinking about this profile would be the school psychologist, our MTSS leaders, and then obviously the teacher contributing to information about how your child is doing. Second question, when do IR results come in? Isn't it the following year? Yes. So we'd be looking at previous year scores to see how they've mastered grade level content over time in those students who are in those grades that are eligible. So it would be 3 through 8. So if you have a second grade or first grade student, we wouldn't have those results because they aren't grade eligible yet to take the test. But we would be looking at their history of actually mastering standards at their grade level to make sure that they're positioned to do well, and that profile is one that's probably most aligned with acceleration. If a child is already single subject accelerated, but still seeks challenge, can they be accelerated again? So yes, absolutely. So if we still would like to think about placement in a more advanced course, so perhaps you have a third grader who is already accelerated and taking fourth grade English language arts, really probably needs challenge even there. We can absolutely take a look again and think about fifth grade English language arts. And that would just be, again, that placement exam to make sure that they are positioned to take on those standards in 5th grade as a 3rd grader. Where do we register for the bridge course? So I can share that link in just a moment. What if you're not sure if you should request single subject or whole grade? If you think your child may be accelerated in a couple subjects, but not positive if she would be recommended to just accelerate those subjects or in an entire grade. So you would go ahead and you can choose single subject or whole grade, because the team will kind of give you some guidance in terms of, and just mention on the form that you are thinking about both, or share this with your principal, and they'll be able to give you some guidance in terms of what the best path is. I personally would probably default to whole grade, because then you can move down and think about like what the single subject could be, or what their strengths and probably challenge profiles look like. But if you think that, if you're trying to choose between single subject and whole grade, just so you can get the whole kind of picture, I would suggest going for whole grade. Can a single subject acceleration be for 2 subjects? So the single subject acceleration is just for the one, but in terms of can we move a couple grade levels up? Absolutely. The single subject would just be typically for math or English language arts, or I keep using Spanish or French, so it'd be for one subject. Will the assessment testing take place during the day while the child is at school? Sometimes it will. Sometimes as we help to group students, because we do want to make sure that we're being efficient with our testing, we do have schools who will offer some after school and Saturday options, just to make sure that we are meeting those deadlines. So it could be both and. Question, how are schools individually supported as it relates to accelerated students? A friend of mine has an accelerated student and her school seems to actively discourage it. So the Accelerated Placement Act really drives what we do for all students. So there shouldn't be a discouraging of this. This is an opportunity that's open to all. So please feel free to email me directly, just so I better understand what kind of is at the root of that. So the next question is, can you do single subject acceleration for a 2nd year in a row if your child has strong MAP scores? So yes, if you'd like to accelerate beyond the accelerated grade of acceleration that they're already in, you would simply contact the school, and then you would let them know that you'd like to move beyond just that grade of acceleration into perhaps a different grade, and they would give and share kind of a placement exam to make sure that that student is ready. Will the MTSS team be able to assess a student for single subject acceleration for a student in lower elementary grades like a current kindergartner? Much of this discussion seems based on standardized assessments for older grades. Absolutely. So there are a number of assessments that we look at in terms of younger students. So the cognitive assessment covers all age ranges. We'll also be able to look at achievement testing. So ESGI, Ames Web Plus, BAS, like current kind of their relevant school history, but also be able to give those end of course exams in those grades. So this does not apply just to those it does apply to all grades K through 8. So this seems to be a more child specific question about the single subject acceleration for ELA. So please feel free to email me that. It just gives some student information. Do 8th graders go to the high school? So yes, if your student has maxed out on our middle school offerings, then we have an agreement with Oak Park River Forest High School, and we're actually in the middle of kind of making that transition now, where you can actually place into some of those high school courses. Will students take a year-end assessment for the following grade year, the grade they will potentially miss, as a part of the evaluation process this year? So they will actually take not the grade that they'll potentially miss, but all of the assessments will be offered. So you'll have the MAP assessment. 5th graders will be able to participate in the 6th grade placement exam no matter what. However, as a child moves into the grade of acceleration, they will be taking those assessments aligned with that grade. So students will take, again, the map spans grades 2 through 8. We have Ames Web Plus, we have ESGI. All of those assessments will move forward as they typically would. But if a student is accelerated into another grade, they will take, for instance, as I mentioned, if you're a 5th grader taking 6th grade math, you will take the middle school version of the math test. The 2nd through 5th math test is the same. So what are the IR test dates? They are right after spring break. We start the Tuesday after spring break. If my daughter advances in ELA another level, what ELA courses classes are available at OPRF that she could take at a higher level? So the same way that we went through that math department, you can actually kind of see the same thing with the course departments in all of the areas. So you can take a look at the Oak Park River Forest High School website, and they'll tell you exactly what it is. But it would be that freshman level English course that she would be taking. I'm sorry, just reading the question. Again, someone just went to the district, and we talked about gifted children and how their needs fit in with enrichment and special education needs across the school. The diamond-shaped diagram. In this meeting, we're talking about something very different. Students maybe a class or entire grade or a grade level up than their age indicates, other than gifted or honors programming, which in my experience revolves around different ways of learning and presenting information and expectations of mastery and opportunities to help direct some learning. So why does Julia not have the latter kind of programming? So within our classrooms, at the elementary level, we have enrichment specialists that really kind of support teachers in making sure that all of their courses are universally designed and differentiated to provide those opportunities for students in that grade level class. And the same happens in our middle schools, where teachers really are gifted in kind of making sure that if a student requires advanced learning, that they're thinking about how to make sure that they're supporting those students across a range. So they are differentiating their supports in the classroom. Great question. If a 5th grader is already signed up for the bridge course, do we need to complete the school form on March 1st? No. So if your 5th grader is already, that is the sole way to move into Math 7 at the middle school. So you have no need to complete the school form on March 1st, unless you wanted to move into Math 8 and go beyond that, or algebra or geometry. But if you're just moving into, again, interested in Math 7 for your 5th grader, there's no need to complete the form. How many students, either overall or per school, do single subject acceleration? So last year, and I can just say our district-wide numbers were at about 100, and most of those were single subject acceleration. I would say probably about 98%. So that would be the number district-wide. What percentage of students a year typically take an accelerated course? So again, that same number, and we're obviously looking to provide more access. So hopefully through these processes and kind of having these conversations, we'll make sure that we get more students on that path. Is there a written math exam for a 2nd grader looking to take Math 3? So the end of year course exam is actually in writing. So students will actually have to finish a math exam. And so we have those at each grade level. So your 2nd grader looking to take Math 3 would be able to take that end of course exam in writing. In middle school, what courses can students qualify for single subject acceleration? So mathematics, English language arts, also individuals and societies, which also kind of focuses on obviously our social studies, social science courses, and then science, and also any of the languages, so French or Spanish. Do you know about how many students were? I think we talked about this. What is the assessment given to a 2nd grader since they do not take the IAR? So at each grade level, the IAR is definitely part of the profile. It's not the only measure. So at each grade level, we do have end of course exams. We do look at NWEA MAP scores. We do look at, for 2nd grade, again, they will be taking MAP. For kindergarten first, we're looking at Ames Web. We're also looking at our BAS scores across K through 5. So there are a number of different assessments on top of the individual assessments that would be given. So the CAST program is 933. Is there some way to accommodate the math acceleration program and CAST over the summer? If you could just send me that question, and I can, I think there's a question just about kind of conflicts with CAST or Bravo. So how does the school team concept work for kids transferring into the district? So once you're in the district, we can, you have a school team automatically. If you're not yet in the district, so if you're a parent who's in a different school right now and hasn't quite transferred in, the March 1st, we wouldn't be able to open the form to you just yet until you actually register and enroll. Once you do register and enroll, that school concept team automatically kicks in. So you'd have a school psychologist, you'd be able to check with MTSS lead, we'd be able to give all of those assessments if you are registered at our school during that assessment opening. Once an elementary school child enters the accelerated track for math, would they definitely go to the middle school for math in 5th grade and high school for math in 8th grade? Perhaps. So in middle school, there are 5 offerings for 3 grade levels. So there's math 6, math 7, math 8, and then algebra and geometry. So a student who would typically move just one single subject would still be able to cover that trajectory and end perhaps middle school with algebra or geometry. If we're looking for something beyond that, those 5 courses, then they would be eligible to take courses at the high school. Who is MTSS? Who is that leader? So there at every school, it's a great question. At every school, there is someone who really guides that diamond that I showed you at the beginning, who really makes sure that students really get the supports they need from intervention to enrichment. So that leader who looks at data, supports students, is present in every school, and they would be the one who'd be shepherding you through this process. What if they didn't take the IAR last year? So if they were grade or age eligible to take the IAR last year and did not, we are making an exception because we are not giving you this information until this moment, but they would have to take the IAR during this upcoming administration, because now that we've made the change and families are aware, we want to make sure that they're taking that IAR assessment. Will there be consideration or support for the social maturity aspect of whole grade accelerations? Absolutely. So that's a critical piece of when we're thinking about the multiple sources of data. We definitely want to make sure that we're talking with teachers, talking with families, talking with students to understand where they are in terms of really being ready for acceleration, and then supporting those students who may either need a bit of or on the cusp and may just need a bit of support, or really making sure that we have a good grasp of whether or not they're ready to move on. So it's not just about test scores. It was really about whether or not students are ready from a whole child perspective to make that move. Are there mechanisms in place to make sure kids who accelerate whole grade aren't treated differently by their peers in their class? Absolutely. So the one thing that we want to make sure that we do in terms of creating welcoming environments for all students is having those, this is why it's a team effort, is talking with the team and talking about with the teacher who would receive the student, the teacher who had the student, and kind of thinking about what that transition would look like. So as you're building that transition plan, we want to be really mindful of what it means for students to walk into that space a year younger than most of their peers. So there's absolutely work done by the team to make sure that they're obviously supported, but that those classrooms understand that no matter who's in that space, we're there to kind of do our best and learn. Is it possible to do a single subject acceleration for a core and a special, so math and Spanish? So no, so still single subject really does mean single subject. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about that in that way. But feel free to share. I think the question is about math and Spanish. I'd like to understand that a bit more deeply, so feel free to email me. Do I understand correctly that the assessment test will be scheduled for an individual student after we submit the application on March 1st? If we want our child to take the assessment test, is there another step we need to take? No, so once you, again, submit the referral form and the principal acts on it, gives you the official referral form, and then, which is kind of your signal that you're gonna move ahead in the process, then those will be scheduled during that March, after that March 1st date, so automatically. Are the students tested on the skipped subject grade level when they haven't been introduced to that material? Yes. So what we're looking for in terms of aptitude is a student's approach to novel material. So do they understand how to approach the text? Again, that's a couple grade levels beyond. And that's kind of what the IO acceleration scale is asking for. Do they understand how to approach? We're not thinking about mastery necessarily, but what is the approach to them being able to really kind of use that fluid reasoning to think through approaching that problem. So yes, they are tested on the skipped subject grade level alongside their current grade level. My son is currently accelerated for ELA in elementary. Could we simultaneously, I'm so sorry, explore whole grade acceleration and additional grade acceleration for ELA, and then decide after what the best fit is? So we're talking to our school teams to determine, again, what's the best educational plan for your students if you're thinking about acceleration. So all of these things are possible. So once you kind of get the information, and I think that's kind of what you're getting, can you then decide if you're going to do what you're going to do? So absolutely. So the first step is really understanding that profile and then working with the school team to make the best decision for whether or not it should be whole grade, whether or not it should be 2 grades accelerated or simply whole grade. So you'll make that decision with your team based on the data that they've collected. What about kids who are native Spanish speakers? Is there a heritage language class grouping in middle school which would have enough such kids to fill a class? So this is something that we're always kind of looking at, and we do have a plan. So in terms of typically our books classes, they have a Spanish or course, and we're looking at making sure that that's also the case for Julian. So we're always looking at numbers to make sure that they work out, but this is something that's been top of mind for our middle schools and planning for a long time. But in terms of a heritage language grouping, we are always looking to make sure that there are enough students to really kind of make sure that that will work. And that's, again, please email me privately because I'd love to talk a bit more about that. What does the ELA accelerated single subject for elementary look like? Example, reading comprehension, vocabulary, and writing, or is it just reading comprehension? That's a great question, and I want to make sure I'm clear on this. It is all of the components of reading and written expression. So it's not just, as we would say, reading units to study. It is also reading units to study and writing units to study. So it is reading and writing, writing about reading, all of those things combined. I have seen enrichment programs being offered for math, but is the same program offered for first grade ELA if a student is performing a year ahead, i.e. reading at a level M? So yes, our enrichment specialists are going into our early grades classrooms and thinking about kind of supporting critical thinking skills beyond that are not necessarily specific to a grade. And then at the same time, offering obviously single subject acceleration in ELA, but that enrichment supports are all also being offered in our early grades programs. Can I speak to the ELA offerings that are in middle school? Is this available on our website? So right now, in terms of nomenclature, it is 6th grade ELA, 7th grade ELA, and 8th grade ELA. So there isn't a freshman level component that would happen at the middle school. We would actually have to move to the high school for that. But they are, in terms of our IB units and kind of what happens in ELA in middle school, it's probably actually best to look at our site under kind of that IB, but also feel free to reach out to to me, and I can connect you and talk a bit more in depth about what they look like. But it is like 6th grade ELA, 7th grade ELA, and 8th grade ELA. What are potential implications for a single subject accelerated student who has a sibling in the next grade level? So that's why we ask all those questions about siblings, because we want to be really careful and mindful in making that decision with you about what placement could look like. So as a rule, we obviously have several classrooms at each grade level, and there is no school in the district that has only one class at a grade level. So we can make those decisions, but that would be something that we'd have to think about for your student and why we really seek that information. So the team, as they're making that decision, if a student is eligible, will also think about and talk about placement, given that siblings are also in the school. And I am right at 7:26, so I'm just going to take two more, and I apologize. I think I have quite a few still left, but feel free to again, email me and I'll try and answer those questions. So to confirm, if my daughter already did a single subject acceleration in ELA, a 7th grade, and we want to advance her to another level within ELA, 9th grade, do we follow the same application process? Or is the process different? Who do you reach out to about this? So again, if your child is already single subject accelerated, you don't have to go through the cognitive testing or the like we've already kind of done those things, but it would require a placement test. So you would reach out to your school level administrator and talk through how to make sure that we're kind of working through that placement test and not the entire process. Because again, we've already found your student eligible. And then the final question is, do most, and this is not the final question in the chat, but the final question that I'll be able to take tonight is, do most children start accelerating in 1st grade or do most start later? You know, in terms of what the data is saying, in looking at what we're looking at, it's probably elementary, probably 2nd, 3rd grade, just kind of based on our data, but there's no grade that I would say is off limits for acceleration. So please feel free to complete the referral process. But in terms of what the data has shown us, it is typically starting probably 2nd or 3rd grade or so. And I apologize that I couldn't get to all of your questions. Hopefully I got to most. Thank you again for your time and attention here. If you have something that hasn't been answered, feel free to contact me. Again, my email address is elofton@op97.org. It's been great spending time with you. I hope that you learned a bit more about the process. And again, if you have any questions that need answering that haven't been addressed yet, please feel free to contact me. Thank you and have a great rest of your evening. Thank you so much.